On May 6, 1889, the world converged in Paris for the Exposition Universelle, in English, the World's Fair. Crowds from around the world were amazed by the incredible entrance tower that welcomed all visitors, a monument dubbed the Eiffel Tower. Oceans away, in a smaller part of the world, a family was ready to welcome their last baby, a little girl. The two events couldn't seem more different in importance and grandiosity, but that little girl, Harriet Hoyt Bowers, grew up to marry the love of her life, Binnie Hans Sorensen. Their family today continues to stand as a monument to the love, faith, and devotion that carried them through a life well lived. Harriet's father, Isaiah Bowers, was born in England in 1846 to James Bowers and Maria Leigh Bowers. He was the ninth of 10 children. His father was a coal miner. They met the Mormon missionaries, and the family embraced the gospel of Jesus Christ. They immigrated to the United States in 1856 and crossed the plains in the first handcart company. Isaiah settled in Nephi, Utah. It was there he met and married Harriet Hoyt in 1868. In 1869, they were called to serve in the Muddy Mission in the Moapa Valley of what was then Utah and is now Nevada. When Nevada claimed title to that area in 1871, Isaiah and Harriet moved to Mount Carmel, Utah. In 1875, the settlers in that area were organized into the United Order, and Isaiah and Harriet ultimately relocated to Orderville, Utah. They lived in the United Order until it was disbanded. In 1884, Isaiah married a second wife, Philanda Amanda Sperry Bowers. They had 3 children together. She had other children from a previous marriage. Isaiah's 2 families had separate residences. Harriet's family was a busy family. The same month she was born, Lorenzo Snow called her mother, Harriet Hoyt Bowers, to be a midwife for the people. This call often took her mother away from the home, and much of her early care was given by her father, Isaiah Bowers. Just 2 years later, and a few miles down the road, a young mother welcomed her first baby. Binnie was born on his mother Miranda's 18th birthday and was named Abinadi in honor of a family friend. But by the age of 8, he had requested to officially be called Binnie and was baptized under that name. He shared a house with his parents, aunts and uncles, and a few cousins. Early in her life, Harriet came to be called Hat or Hattie. While she was quite young, she took on a new role, Big Sister. Her father's second wife, Aunt Manda, as Hat knew her, died, and her 2 children came to live in Hat's house. Hat said, "I was no longer the baby. Some changes for me. I was to be a big sister. When the dishes were to be washed, Sarah was small, too little to reach the dishes. So the dishes were Hat's to do. Sarah had the most beautiful hair, and she hated it combed. It took William and Lily to hold her while we braided her hair. I had short, thin hair that needed little combing. I didn't much care how it looked. I used to be glad my hair was short, for Sarah yelled so hard and loud when her hair was combed. Sarah loved to tend the babies. I would rather do anything than tend, so we got along fine." Binnie was always busy with growing up. He attended school in Mount Carmel with a term at Murdoch Academy in Beaver. His father was called as the bishop when Binnie was 9, which led to a lot of opportunities to be around the house with visiting general authorities. School teachers were also often boarded at their home. At age 18, Binnie left to serve a mission in the Western States Mission. He tracked it across Nebraska, North and South Dakota, and everywhere else he was asked to go. He writes of holding house meetings, tracting with companions, and finding friendly places to spend the night while traveling. Binnie had developed a bright, powerful tenor voice and confidence to participate in musical activities. During his mission, he began to write down the words of his favorite songs of the day. The first 52 pages of his missionary journal are full of the verses and choruses of these songs, many of which were favorites of him and his family for the rest of his life. He almost undoubtedly sang himself and his companions into meals and overnight sleeping arrangements as they were walking through the country. Hat and Binnie had been going together before his mission, but it never occurred to him to ask her to wait. Hat once remarked, "No, you never mentioned it. I had too many guys." She certainly was popular. While Binnie was going out on his mission, Hat was working hard at the store and going with a boy named Bob Foote. Her parents were concerned because of all the guys Hat had gone with. Bob Foote was the one who wasn't a member of the church. When she told him at the store where she was working that she was getting married, they all assumed it was to Bob Foote. They were all surprised when they found out she'd said yes to Binnie Sorensen, and no one was surprised or relieved more than her mother. Agreeing to get married was the first step in their 65 years together. When she was 90 years old, Hat recorded her memories of that time and their early family life together. Hat said, "In June, I went back to Kanab to help my sister Clara. It was conference time, and she had to cook and house the visitors from Salt Lake. So I helped wash dishes, set the table, and tend kids. I didn't get to much of the conference. Binnie came over. I think he thought I was having fun. We washed a house full of dirty dishes, put the kids to bed, and went outside and sat on Clara and Heber's porch. He said if all I had to do was wash dishes for my sister, that maybe I would go wash dishes for him." He talked some more. I talked, and we decided to get married at October conference. We went to the Salt Lake Temple at 7 in the morning on Friday, October 2nd, 1912, and never had any breakfast. We were there until 7 that night. We only had a piece of bread they brought us. There were 20 marriages. I decided then, if it took that long to get married, I would stay married. I didn't want to try it again. The folks gave us a nice supper. We had a beautiful cake and some beautiful hand-painted dishes. I still have them. We had a party, a dance. We got a lot of nice presents, 6 sets of tumblers which lasted me for years, a lot of towels, and a beautiful bedspread and a number of blankets. There was no grand proposal, just a decision to start a life together. There were no guarantees of ease or prosperity, just a promise made to work together to create something that could last for eternity. Hat wrote about welcoming their first baby and the difficult task of picking a name. Hat said, "He was the first grandchild for the Sorensens. Of course, they all had names picked out for him, such as Ivan, Charles, Edward. We couldn't decide on a name, so one Sunday, while Binnie was gone, I took the baby to church and had him named. Valette told Binnie I had named him Binnie Isaiah. He wouldn't speak to me. That evening, Edna Lamb came to visit, and she said she sure liked the name we had named the baby. She had never heard it before. He wouldn't ask then what it was until after supper we were washing the dishes, and one of the kids said, 'Burke was a really nice name.' Binnie said, 'You told me you named him Binnie, and I had made up my mind to get rid of you both, but I guess I'll keep you for a while longer.'" End quote. Grandma and Hat grew even closer as they both went through pregnancy in 1915. Miranda's last baby, Doyle, was born in August. Clara was born just a few months later on October 21st, 1915. She was crying, and she cried for 6 months. Hat stayed in Orderville for a while, thinking she would get better, but she still cried. Hat and Clara went back to Carmel, but the crying baby soon wore everyone out, so they came back home to Orderville. Hat later said that Clara grew up to be the most pleasant person she ever knew. While Hat was in Orderville, Binnie helped Gusty Anderson move, and in return, she gave him a little house on the hill back of Mount Carmel Schoolhouse. Their first home wasn't a mansion, but it was a place to raise their growing family. Soon they had chickens and a garden, both things that were important to them for the rest of their lives. Just like their decision to get married, there were not a lot of big pronouncements of love, but there are moments where you can see just how deeply they cared for each other. Hat said, quote, "That fall I planned to get me a new coat. There was one on sale at the Orderville Co-op. I had $74. I wasn't able to come to town for a while to get it, and a man selling sewing machines came to the house. Binnie was out of town. I needed a machine. I asked him how much he wanted. He said $80. I told him I just didn't quite have $80. He said, 'Just give me what you have and we'll call it even.' I gave him my coat money, and he gave me an all-paid receipt. I wasn't as happy as I might have been. I wasn't just sure what Binnie would say. When I told him what I had done, he just laughed and said, 'You can make a coat.' I knew I couldn't. The next time Binnie went to town, he came home with an old gunny sack. He said, 'You know you can make a coat out of this.' I was almost mad at him. He knew how I needed that coat, but I knew he couldn't pick up $74. So I laughed and said, "Yes, I'll use your nightshirt to line it with." The gunny sack lay on the floor, and when Binnie went to do the chores, Burke got a hold of it and began to pull it around, and out fell my coat. I sat down and cried and cried. Binnie said if he would have known I was going to cry about it, he would have let me go and get it myself. I wore that coat for 12 years and was always proud of it. That spring they moved to the ranch. The ranch was located off Highway 9 between Zion National Park and Mount Carmel Junction. It was a lot different to be living in a sheep wagon and cooking in a tent. Soon they made plans to build a house near the orchard. Their families helped them to settle into this new home. Hat said, quote, "I think it was 1916, the year Clara was 1 year old, that Grandpa Sorensen came to the ranch with a wagon load of small cottonwood trees. He planted them all around Broad Hollow. He planted one locust tree. I really enjoyed those trees. They had a different sound in the spring. I called them my harp of the wind. Sometimes the breeze almost sounded like music." End quote. They enjoyed creating their life on the ranch. Together, they planted a garden. Binnie worked hard, even hiring a hand to help clear land. Life was not without its challenges. Hat recalled one particular night that was especially eventful. Hat said, quote, "In August of 1917, Clara woke up one night and cried out. I got up and lit the lamp to see what was wrong with her. She was blue and very stiff. I thought she was dying, but I remembered Mother telling me of children having such spells. Binnie got up and put warm water on the stove in the wash boiler. I put her in this warm water. She stopped jerking and opened her eyes. I wrapped her in a warm blanket and held her while Binnie got things ready to come to Mother's. We were not sure Clara was going to live. I told Mother I was afraid I was going to be sick. We were expecting our third baby in October, but not now. But by sunup, a tiny baby boy was born. He weighed less than 5 pounds. He was so small, they had no hope that he would live. This was August 22nd, 1917. Father blessed him. I told him to give him a little name. He was such a small baby. He named him Ray. I think that was one time I was dependent on someone else, and I knew it." End quote. When Ray was 3 weeks old, they moved back to the ranch. That winter, the snow covered the fences. You could hardly see the backs of the cattle when they came to drink. Even with severe weather, no one got sick, and Ray miraculously continued to grow just fine. In the spring of 1918, Binnie went to Kanab to sign up for the draft. Hat was so scared he'd be called to the war, but thankfully just a few months later the armistice was signed and the war came to an end. The fall of 1919 was the first year Burke went to school. He stayed with Hat's mother and sister Lily. That year was a cold and stormy December with a lot of sickness. Across the country, communities were hit with the Spanish flu brought home by soldiers from the front. In the midst of this, Clara had been sick a lot, and Hat was expecting another baby. They both went to Orderville just before Christmas to be with Hat's mom. Hat worried about Binnie at the ranch alone. With so much sickness going around, she was afraid he would get sick and have no one to care for him. He did get sick and came to Carmel to stay with his folks. They took care of him. Christmas Day that year was an eventful one. Hat said, quote, "My mother was gone all day with so many sick. When she came home, I told her if she would stay home, I believe I would have my baby. Mont was born about 10 p.m. that Christmas night. He was a small, starved little thing, but good-natured. At the end of January, the family moved back to the ranch. After they moved back, word came that Ella, Hat's older sister, had lost her 3 grown children to the flu and had given birth to a baby boy. In April, word came that Will, Hat's brother, had died and that her mother was ailing. Hat came to Orderville as quick as she could, but couldn't stay with her mother because it wasn't safe for the baby and the children. Her mother died on April 26, 1920, one of the hundreds of thousands affected by this terrible flu. With so much loss, it's no wonder that Hat decided she couldn't send the children away when it was time for school to start. But they needed to be in school. So she decided to get a tent and live on her father's lot. It was a difficult year, Hat said. That year, it seemed like the whole world was wrong. Clara was sick most of that winter, and Burke thought he had to fight every kid in town. It was late fall before Hat was able to move back to town for the kids' school. But this time, they moved into an old home where the high school is now. It was a big move. Stove, beds, tables, dishes, a tub, a washboard, and everything they owned. They still went back and forth to the ranch. Hat described that as a lonely time with tired, cranky children and a sadness that hung in the air from losing so many family members, especially her mother. She felt the sadness especially as she prepared to welcome her fifth baby in the winter of 1922. During that pregnancy, all her other children developed whooping cough. Between pregnancy, sick children, and battling her own illnesses, Hat became very sick as her due date approached. When the baby came on January 15th, Hat and Binnie had not decided on a name. In fact, Binnie was away and wouldn't be back for another month. The house felt cold and lonely, and Hat longed for her mother to be by her side, as she had been with her other babies. But even with sadness, there was joy for this new Sorensen, and he needed a name. When he was a week or so old, Lucy Egglested, who had lost a baby in December, came to visit. She asked Hat if she would name the baby Hans Boy. When Bishop Chamberlain came by to see Hat, she told him she wouldn't be able to come to church, and would he bless the baby. He did, and blessed him Hans Boy. Binnie was gone for 7 or 8 weeks and met the baby when he was over a month old. In April, Hat was ready to be back at the ranch with her chickens and her cottonwood trees. School wasn't quite finished, so Burke and Claire stayed with their Aunt Lily until it finished. That summer, there was a lot of new school homesteaders, and the Sorensen place was a good lunch stopping place. It was a busy time, but Binnie and Hat loved meeting and feeding. When the Sunday school was organized, Binnie was called as superintendent. On Sunday, they would all go up to the little meadow where the creek goes down the canyon, and there in the oaks, they built a little room. Sometimes there were as many as 60 people in their Sunday school. Even though it would be hectic, they loved this time. Hat said, quote, "We would take our lunch and eat together. Those early Sunday mornings getting ready to go to Sunday school were hectic. We made sure the baked beans were done, the bread sliced, and the salad ready, and the milk seen to. The children had to be ready before Binnie came with the team to hitch on the hay rack wagon. With a quilt to sit on and our hymn book, we were ready and we left for Sunday school. Those mornings, as we trotted up the road, Binnie would sing hymns. I didn't. Those were happy days." It was hard to leave that idyllic setting, but in the fall, Hat and the kids moved back into Orderville for school. A friend let them move into an old home, which wasn't great, but they made do. When the school year ended, everyone was ready for the freedom of the ranch and other summer activities. In the summer of 1923, President Warren G. Harding was taking a trip through Zions Park. Binnie and Hat told the story together of meeting the President and First Lady. Binnie said, quote, "When we were living up there once, why, the President of the United States came down into Zions Canyon. Lena Esplin and I took Burke. Burke was just a little kid and I went. He was quite a ragged little feller. She'd sent for some clothes for him. He didn't have any, but he went in his holy ones. We each went down there and seen the President of the United States and stayed for 1 day and 2 nights. I believe while we were there, Ma stayed and done the chores. But when we were down there, Mrs. Florence Harding took Burke and sat him on her lap, and she was telling him how she raised her little boy." End quote. Hat said, quote, "He didn't have a hat. All he had was this little cap and his old red head and his pants with patches sewn in the knees. When he was standing there, she said, 'You look just like my little boy,' and she called him over. He came over and she took that cap off and rubbed his hair and pulled him up on her lap and held him during the meeting. We felt quite honored." End quote. With fall and a new school year coming, Hat started to get worried about where she and her children were going to live. She was expecting baby number 6, but it seemed to her that Binnie didn't seem to care where they were going to stay. She was sick with worry, determined not to be apart from her children, and on top of that, her order for the children's school clothes had never been delivered. Hat wrote about what happened the Saturday before school started. Hat said, quote, "Binnie came home late. I was still washing dishes when he came, and he never said anything about the clothes, and I never asked him. After a while, he took Burke to go get things from the wagon. It was the children's clothes I had sent for. I opened it and saw everything was there. Burke wanted to know when he could go to school, and Binnie said, 'I guess I'll have to tell you. I bought you a house today. It's one of the oldest ones in town.' Well, I thought of every old house, and at last he said it was the old Carling house. I knew Fran Esplin had just moved into that house, so I looked up and said, 'Binnie, This is no time for jokes. I just can't take one about this." Then he pulled out some papers from his pocket and handed them to me. Sure enough, it was the old Sister Carling house. He said the Esplins had a job and had moved and sold it to him. It was clean, painted, and had new carpets on it. There was a cook stove, one table, 2 chairs, and a few bedsteads. I just sat down and cried. Monday we moved down and was ready to go to school. The kids went to school in the church, and it was so nice to have a home of my own. On December 8th, 1923, in her new home, Hat gave birth to another baby girl. She was smart and cute from the start. Binnie's sister Valette was Hat's main helper. Hat had a bad leg and couldn't walk very well, so she asked Valette to take the baby to church with Binnie and name her what she wanted. She came home with the name Dorotha, and Hat loved it. Many changes came soon after they bought the house. In the spring of 1925, Binnie ordered fruit trees. When they came, Binnie was gone, but his dad, Hans, came by and he dug the holes and put the trees in. The next day they got word that Hans had been killed. Hat and Binnie loved him very much and really felt his loss. Just a year later, Hat's father, Isaiah, passed away on November 17, 1926. Then Aunt Lily moved away. Hat missed them both a lot. At first, Hat thought that all the change and loss was causing her to feel poorly, but soon she began to lose weight and feel run down. The goiter on her neck grew, and the doctor finally said it needed to come out. In early December of 1928, Binnie took Hat to Salt Lake for her operation. The doctor removed a tumor from her neck, and from that day on, she started to feel better. Hat said, quote, "Summers were spent at the ranch. The children were growing. We had teenagers now. Each day, they thought of something to do. We would have a rodeo in the corral with the calves, or see who could outrun who to the house. Loser carries the milk buckets to milk. In the evening, when one of the little boys had gone for the milk cow, and it had become dark before they came back, I would walk up to the pond and listen for them to come over the hill. How my heart would jump when I could hear the tinkle of the cowbell or hear the songs of the boys were singing. The next spring, wonder of wonders, another baby. A boy born February 20th, 1930. He was born in Kanab. When we brought him home, it was like a first baby. I had given all my baby clothes away. We didn't have a baby bed. We named him Hugh. He was so cute and was loved by all of us. Binnie made a tent on the back of our house, but it was too cold for the baby out there, so Ray would take him upstairs with him. Oh, how Ray loved that baby." End quote. By now, Binnie and Harriet's family was growing and changing. In 1940, Burke left on his mission. Ray left for a job in California, and soon Clara joined him, living and working out there. Burke came home from his mission and got married 2 months later. 9 months after that, Binnie and Hat became grandparents and started one of their most favorite parts of life. Dot went to California to work and lived with Clara and Ray. Hat describes this stage of life. "Hugh was all we had at home. Mont and Voy both were in the Army. Many nights and days I spent praying for them. War was a terrible thing. I could hardly stand it. My boys were fighting a war. I remember when I heard Voy had been wounded, I said, at least he had had clean sheets to sleep in. Later I found out he never did have clean sheets to sleep in." Over the next few years, Hat faced several health problems, from fixing her teeth to fixing her lungs. She never really did like being away from home or in the hospital, and spent most of her time convincing the doctor to let her go home. In May of 1945, Binnie was also called to be bishop. That changed things in their home and kept Binnie very busy. He served in that calling until 1952. As their children continued to grow and start families of their own, Binnie and Harriet became grandparents to the new generation of Sorensen. They loved having the grandchildren come visit, especially at the ranch. As Binnie's health declined, he and Hat made the difficult decision to part with the ranch, but he still found ways to continue to teach his strong work ethic to his posterity. Harriet wrote about this last stage of their married life. Quote, "Binnie's health was failing, and in 1966 we sold the ranch and we bought a small home in St. George. We spent our winters for a few years in St. George doing temple work. In the summers, we would raise a garden in Orderville. Binnie kept the weeds out by crawling on his hands and knees up the rows. Binnie had a hip operation and never completely recovered from it. This was in 1973. From then on, he was in a wheelchair, but we got along fine. I could push him where he needed to go. One day we received word Ray's oldest boy was getting married. Binnie said how he would like to go to the wedding. Burke's wife Beth said she thought he could go if he thought he could ride. We went to Las Vegas and went on the plane, our first plane ride. Beth went with us. Ray never knew we were coming. They met us at the airport. We stayed with Lee that night. I shall never forget the look on Ray and Betty's faces when they saw us. Binnie's health got so I couldn't care for him. We had to put him in the rest home in Kanab. They were very good to him. I could visit him every day. He kept everyone happy, playing his harmonica and singing. He came home for Thanksgiving, and all the family was here in 1976. The next year was a hard one, seeing him so bad. He always wanted to come home. He passed away November 17, 1977. We had spent 65 years together. Just 3 years later, Hat would join her beloved Binnie. Their love and legacy lives on in each of us here today. Grandma Hat closed her own written history with a testimony of the gospel and also of how important her family was to her, and with the exclamation, "I've been truly blessed."